Forget everything you thought you knew about the abilities of ancient humankind. In this video, we discuss evidence of ancient mariners in the Mediterranean 200,000 years ago. Early modern humans appear to have been going to sea much longer than anyone had ever suspected. That is the startling implication of discoveries made on the Greek island of Crete, a modern human skull from a coastal Greek cave, and other evidence. It was several years ago that a Greek-American archaeological team made a startling discovery. They found the oldest indications of seafaring and navigation in the world, on Crete Island in Greece. Other investigators have speculated that these ancient mariners were Neanderthals, but we present the hypothesis that they were Homo sapiens. It is an incredibly important discovery that is given little attention, despite the fact that it reached the top 10 discoveries of 2010. The research is forcing scholars to rethink the maritime capabilities of early human cultures. The latest thinking on human evolution is that early anatomically modern humans began seeping out of Africa through the Levant at least 200,000 years ago, or maybe even earlier. Considering Crete has been an island for 5 million years, the tools could have only arrived in that location if ancient humans traveled there by boat. This means that sea traveling existed in the Mediterranean Sea hundreds of thousands of years before what archaeologists initially believed, and that early Homo sapiens or their ancestors used boats capable of open sea navigation. What is particularly interesting is that the style of the tools closely resembles artifacts from the stone technology known as Acheulean, which originated with pre-human populations in Africa. For decades, the standard hypothesis has been that Acheulean toolmakers reached Europe and Asia via the Middle East, passing mainly through what is now Turkey into the Balkans. The findings in Crete raise the possibility that human migration was not confined to land routes, and may have included expansion from Africa across the Strait of Gibraltar to Spain, or from Libya to Crete, a stretch of approximately 200 miles. It was initially believed that the earliest boats were log rafts with sails made of animal skins, sewn together and lashed to a tree limb to catch the wind. However, experts on early nautical history have said that the ancient mariners would have required something much sturdier to make the distance between North Africa and Crete, such as dugout canoes. Archaeologists cannot be certain about whether the tools found on Crete were made by Homo sapiens or Neanderthals. 130,000 years ago, modern humans shared the world with other hominids, like Neanderthals and Homo heidelbergensis. It has long been believed that early humans, and certainly pre-human species, were incapable of creating boats or navigating across open water. But this discovery challenges that assertion, and suggests that they were capable of much more sophisticated behavior than their relatively simple stone tools would suggest. In an article entitled "Searching for a Stone Age Odysseus," authors say that up until a decade ago, archaeologists assumed the adventurous travels of Odysseus, as reflected in Homer's Odyssey, were the first ventures in the Mediterranean, believed to have taken place 10,000 years ago. Some others assumed that sea travel was a human endeavor that started in the Bronze Age.
It was a long time ago. Mankind has evolved since then.
Archaeologists claim to have found stone tools in Crete, dating back to at least 130,000 years, leading to assumptions that mankind traveled the seas as early as 200,000 years ago. There is a plausible reason that the artifacts disappear 130,000 years ago. The Earth warmed and sea levels rose, making it much more difficult to reach distant islands from the mainland. The recent find indicates that ancient humans were able to navigate the tricky waters of the Mediterranean. After all, Crete was known to have been inhabited, and it has been an island for over 5 million years, meaning that the people who lived there had once somehow sailed to Crete. Scientists found, in the southern coastal region, hundreds of stone tools quite similar to tools used by both Homo erectus over 1 million years ago and Neanderthals and Homo sapiens more than 130,000 years ago. These tools are indicative of maritime migrations from the Near and Middle East to Europe. An attempt to date the tools has led to an estimate of at least 130,000 years of age, but doubts about their precise date remained. This did not help to dissipate the skepticism of other scientists for such a bold theory. There were also other finds, such as on Naxos. There, Another Greek-Canadian team discovered hundreds of stone tools, more sophisticated than those of Crete in their method of construction, in a flint quarry. Amongst these were hand tools that resemble those made by both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Anthropologists now believe that pre-Homo sapiens populations and early modern humans were also entering Europe through what today is the submerged Aegean basin, via the island of Naxos, where they would have stopped off to extract chert to make their tools. In other words, the discovery of hominin activity on Naxos 200,000 years ago changes the theory of how humans dispersed out of Africa. Nobody looked for Neanderthals or early Homo sapiens on islands, because it was thought they weren't seafaring, but back then, the Aegean wasn't a sea. Now discoveries of stone tools on the Greek island, proven to go back at least 200,000 years, demonstrate that somehow Neanderthals or early humans reached this island. But it didn't occur to science to seek archaic human remains on any Aegean islands, based on the thinking that ancient humans weren't seafarers. During the glacial periods of Ice Age, when much seawater was locked up in the glacier and ocean levels were low, there were apparently marshy land masses between continental Greece and Turkey. The Aegean Sea, in other words, wasn't there. Naxos seems to have been, at times, part of a terrestrial continuum. In fact, there were Stone Age tools all over the islands. Other Paleolithic tools have also been discovered on the Ionian Islands, mainly on Zakynthos and Kefalonia. This, according to the archaeologists, proves that early peoples traveled to the islands much earlier than initially thought. But archaeologists and experts on early nautical history said the discovery appeared to show that these surprisingly ancient mariners had craft sturdier and more reliable than rafts. They also must have had the cognitive ability to conceive and carry out repeated water crossing over great distances, in order to establish sustainable populations producing an abundance of stone artifacts. But there are doubts as to when some islands were cut off from the mainland in the first place. Crete was only 20 miles from the nearest peninsula of mainland Greece, during the lowest ice ages 200,000 years ago. There is a very deep strait separating Crete from the mainland, but the nearest island was attached to the mainland. Another possibility is that ancient human mariners came from the east, by island hopping from Turkey, which involved only two crossing of less than 30 miles each to get to Crete. What's more, a 210,000-year-old skull found less than 100 miles from Crete, on the Greek coast, is the oldest Homo sapiens fossil found outside Africa. In 1978, in a cave called APIDIMA at the southern end of Greece, a group of anthropologists found a pair of human-like skulls. One had a face, but was badly distorted, the other was just the left half of a brain case. Researchers guessed that they might be Neanderthals, or perhaps another ancient hominin. The one with the face, known as APIDIMA II, is a 170,000-year-old Neanderthal, no surprises there. But the other, APIDIMA I, was a 210,000-year-old modern human. And this makes the partial skull the oldest specimen of Homo sapiens outside Africa, beating the previous record holder, a jawbone from Israel's Mislia cave that's about 180,000 years old, only 500 miles east of Crete. Until now, most researchers have focused on the more complete, but less interesting, of the two skulls. APIDIMA I has just been ignored, but its antiquity matters for three reasons. First, it pushes back the known presence of modern humans outside Africa by some 30,000 years. Second, it's considerably older than all other Homo sapiens fossils from Europe, all of which are 40,000 years old or younger. Third, it's older than the Neanderthal skull next to it. Collectively, these traits mess up the standard story of Neanderthal and modern human evolution. According to that narrative, Neanderthals slowly evolved in Europe, largely isolated from other kinds of hominins. When modern humans expanded out of Africa, their movements into Europe might have been stalled by the presence of the already successful Neanderthals. That explains why Homo sapiens stuck to a more southerly route into Asia, and why they left no European fossils until about 50,000 years ago. The idea of Europe as Fortress Neanderthal has been gaining ground, but identifying a 210,000-year-old Homo sapiens skull from Europe really undermines that. It suggests that early Homo sapiens groups got farther than we may have previously thought, occasionally occupying territories that later became that of Neanderthals. Findings like this are very important for informing us on the evolution of our species. The identity of APIDIMA 1 could also cast doubt on other archaeological finds from Europe, such as stone tools with no accompanying fossils. Researchers had long assumed that within a certain time window, any archaeology was all the work of Neanderthals. But if modern humans also occupied this safe range, which species actually created those artifacts? It seems that, as ice ages came and went and sea levels rose and fell, parts of the cave's interior were flooded and eroded, and both skulls were dislodged from their original resting places. They fell into a cavity and got stuck. APIDIMA 2 clearly clustered with Neanderthals, while APIDIMA 1 grouped with skulls from modern humans. APIDIMA 1 lacks several traits that are distinctively Neanderthal, while its rounded shape is considered to be a uniquely modern human feature that evolved relatively late. Finds like 300,000-year-old bones from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco suggest that our species arose from several diverse populations that lived across Africa. Meanwhile, bones from Mislia and APIDIMA tell us that early humans then expanded into other continents, and interacted with other hominins, far earlier than previously thought. The APIDIMA skulls also suggest that the accepted story of Europe, in which modern humans eventually replaced the long-dominant Neanderthals, is too simple. Instead, modern humans were already in Greece about 200,000 years ago. They were then replaced by Neanderthals, who were themselves replaced by humans about 40,000 years ago. A similar cycle of competition, where Neanderthals and humans repeatedly replaced each other, seems to have happened in the Levant, the Middle Eastern region that includes Israel and Syria. We can't refer to Homo sapiens as a success in terms of being able to move into new areas and stay there. Of course, it's possible that both hominins just lived together. But genetic studies suggest that while they did intermittently meet and mate, the groups weren't in constant contact. Greece is a good place to start. It's at the crossroads of three major continents, and it's a refuge where animals and humans could survive at the height of the ice ages. You'd predict population dispersals and range contractions in these areas, the possibility for contact between different groups, and a more diverse human fossil record than you'd find in distant parts of Europe. There aren't many fossils in the region, but it hasn't been much of a research priority. The APIDIMA skulls illustrate that there is much to learn in areas outside of Western Europe and the Levant, where most of our research has concentrated. We may find the first anatomically modern humans lacked the kind of advantages that later Homo sapiens may have had, the very same advantages, she says, that led to our ultimate domination. Additionally, fossils in the Middle East show the first intrepid early Homo sapiens left Africa 200,000 years ago for an icy eastern Mediterranean. The discovery of fossils of cold-climate rodents alongside remains of the region's first modern humans shows they arrived from the hot cradle of Africa during the Ice Age, but were able to adapt. Tiny fossils found in a cave on Israel's Mount Carmel could shift our understanding of human evolution, indicating that the first venturesome modern humans who migrated from Africa to Israel 200,000 years ago did so during an ice age. The earliest known record of Homo sapiens outside of Africa proves that those early modern humans arrived during an ice age and yet were able to thrive after leaving the cradle of humankind despite the drastically cooler temperatures. The analysis contradicts the popular theory that the ice age delayed human migration between continents. This first sign of human adaptability displays the characteristics that would eventually lead to our species' world domination. People who evolved in Africa, in a completely different environment, took this step, which you don't see any other species in world history with the ability to do, to step out of their original cradle into a different environment and be able to survive. That's what eventually allowed humans to reach every corner of the world. The study charts the first instance of this unique adaptability, which appears in a much earlier phase of human evolution than scientists have previously thought. In the study, The researchers further extend common wisdom regarding man's migration and state that these bold early humans entered a climatic unknown when migrating north from Africa. Ice Age Israel would have presented a much different biosphere, including much lower temperatures and different flora and fauna than the cradle of humankind. The evidence of thriving, long-term human settlement in the Mislia cave shows that these first migrators from Africa overcame climatic obstacles and successfully adapted to new conditions. The researchers base their theory upon thousands of rodent fossils, most under 1 mm in size, that were gathered in the same settlement layer in the Mount Carmel cave. The rodent lived during the Ice Age, but disappeared from the Levant more than 150,000 years ago. Today, they still live in colder regions such as the Zagros Mountains of northwestern Iran and in the Caucasus Mountains. Ice Age Israel could perhaps better be labeled an icy age. Broadly speaking, the temperature would have been circa 5 degrees Celsius, 41 Fahrenheit, which would allow for cohabitation of other warmer climate species that were found in the cave assemblage with the cold climate voles. Other animal remains found in the cave were used for food, including auroch, extinct cattle, and other deer steaks, hares, ostrich eggs and wild boars. The region at that time would have been vastly different from the arid land we are accustomed to. If we were transported back in time in a DeLorean, we would not recognize it. There were gigantic lakes spanning from the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea. The Ice Age in the Levant made the region more different and challenging for the first migrants from Africa. Furthermore, experiments on 160,000-year-old saltwater clam shell fossils in northern caves indicate they are the earliest examples of shell beads strung for display on the human body. The shells also illustrate the importance of the sea to these ancient people, and a possible reason for early humans to be exploring the Mediterranean by boat. Sometime around 160,000 to 120,000 years ago, early mankind began to string together painted shells and display them. Until now, the earliest potential example of string use was in the form of fibers found on an eagle talon found in Croatia, dating to 130,000 years ago. Early humans migrated out of Africa during the Levantine Ice Age, circa 200,000 years ago. With their arrival to the Israeli caves came their shell collections. In the new study, the authors suggest that the clam shells, which were abundantly found on the beaches not far from the Carmel Mountain caves, were chosen precisely because of their easily strung holes. The data suggest that sometime within the time range of 160 and 120,000 years ago the technology for making strings emerged, and that this technology boosted the collection of naturally perforated shells for display, a practice common to this day. The shells found in the Mislia cave, which date to 240,000 to 160,000 years ago, are intact and presumably not used for decorative purposes. In the Kafzeh cave collection, circa 120,000 years ago, the vast majority of shells were perforated. The authors hypothesized that modern humans collected naturally perforated seashells also for symbolic use. The collection reflects both the desire and the technological ability to suspend shell beads on string to be displayed on the human body. Where there were early humans, there were bivalve shells, which are considered a hallmark of modern human behavior. That modern humans exhibited symbolic behavior is by now well established, and the use of mollusk shell beads is an expression of this behavior. The authors suggest that the shells may indicate status, or even serve as a charm. Their social role is significant, possibly marking the wearer's place in kinship networks, marital status, and group affiliation. They may have served as a type of charm to ward off the evil eye. The scientists concluded that not only were all 5 strung, for showed signs of having been painted with ochre. These shells showed traces that were produced by contact with a string, coloring treatment with ochre, and traces of shell-to-shell contact, all of which indicate that the valves had been arranged on a string, write the authors. In addition to the shell necklaces now being created, the scientists said that early man was changing his clothing style, also circa 160,000 to 120,000 years ago, and essentially getting new threads with the advent of, thread. Modern humans collected unperforated cockle shells for symbolic purposes at 160,000 years ago or earlier, and around 120,000 they started collecting perforated shells and wearing them on a string. But clearly humankind and our predecessors had adventurous spirits. They explored. They might not have known they were boldly going where no human or Neanderthal had gone before, and not thought deeply about supplanting Neanderthal populations as they went along. But go they did. Some think sheer curiosity and daring do lie at the very root of Homo sapiens' success versus other hominin species. And now it seems that at least some of these early people may have crossed into Europe over land masses now sunken beneath the azure waves of the Aegean Sea. The question now remains, if early mankind was able to travel by boat and adapt to a new climate, what kept us in Africa for so long?